We live. Good evening, people. Hope you're well. For those of you that are in the North Island, the weather looks pretty bad. For those of you that are in the South Island, I know it's been snowing there, so hope you're enjoying that. We are back. So I'm being joined by my colleague Zinnia. We both are senior immigration advisors, and we thought that we'll come back and give you a rundown on the latest changes. There's so much happening in the essential skills space, and there's so much confusion, how that impacts residents' applications, what's happening with stand downs, and a whole lot of stuff. So we thought this is your opportunity to ask us the questions so we can provide you with some live consultations, which normally takes quite a while for you to book because our calendars are pretty busy at this stage. So please just feel free to ask us questions so that we can answer as many questions as we possibly can. Zinnia, while we're waiting for people to join us, because I can see the numbers adding up pretty quickly on the people that are viewing the session, I'd want this to kind of reach to a certain number before we start taking the live questions. Why don't we just start with a quick rundown on what changes have been announced? I know we covered that in a little bit of detail last time. We've done a lot of posts on our Facebook around this as well. But let's just talk about ANSCO and essential skills. So let's break this down into chunks for people. So Zinnia, tell us what's changing from Monday.
So from Monday, the change that's coming through is for essential skill work visa holders, ANSCO will no longer be used to determine how long the visa is granted for. That decision will purely be based on the pay rate. It is a pretty simple mathematical equation now. So if you have more than 2550, sorry, I just need to close off my WhatsApp because that will make noises otherwise. If you earn more than 2550, you will get 3 years. If you earn less than 2550, you will get 6 months. There is nothing in between.
Yeah, so I think that's quite important for people to know that it's either 3 years or 6 months because you don't really get anything in the middle. And the 6 months has already been in place since the 10th of July. So that's been in place for a while.
Just a thing to note here that immigration, if you look at the wording carefully, it says that for those earning 2550 and above, immigration can grant a maximum of 3 years. So there could be some special circumstances where they may go lower than 3 years, like a fixed term contract, for example.
Yeah, but I think also the other thing to really understand that there is no 5 years any longer. So you are literally just 6 months or 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's sort of the changes. Also, what people do need to know, there's been auto extensions done for a lot of those people since the last time we did one of our sessions. In fact, 16,500 people visas have been extended, mainly in the essential skills and work to residence space. It does not cover any open work visas, anything else, visitors that were in the country. So it doesn't cover those people. Working holidays does not covered. So there are auto extensions that are done as well. And there's a lot more work that immigration is doing in the background as well. Let's just try and sort of, Zinnia, can you just tell the people that are now joining us that how do these 27th of July changes, do they have any impact on residence applications?
No. So residence applications, so skill migrant category in particular, uses the ANSCO concept, and essential skills uses the ANSCO concept. So normally what people think is that because if you have been approved, because they're the same concepts being used, people tend to club the two together, but they are completely separate applications. And immigration in their webinar today did reiterate that a couple of times. Essential skills is a different application to SMC. SMC has not changed. Skill migrant category criteria has not changed, and nothing is earmarked for change in the near future. We don't know what will happen later, but so far there are no announcements on SMC changes. So it's only an essential skill change, which impacts partners as well. So one of the changes, the way you are testing the labor market, while substantially the same, what it means is that if you're earning more than median wage, you only need to do your general seek, trade me type of advertising. But if you are earning below 2550, you must do that like a local medium, but you have to engage with work and income as well for a skill match report. There's a bit of whistle on your side, Arunima, in the sound. So yeah, a lot better. Thank you. So that's one of the main things. And if you are earning above median wage, you can support your partner on a work visa. If you are below median wage, you can only support a partner on a visitor visa. In both circumstances, though, your kids can go to school. So if you have a dependent child, they can go to school and have domestic fees, but you must meet the minimum income requirements there. Doesn't matter what you earn, but you have to meet the minimum income requirements.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those of you that are wondering, so basically just to wrap this up, because there's so many changes, and just to break it down into chunks so people don't get confused. So if you are going to be over 25-50, there's a lot of people that are currently supporting the partners on work visas. If you are over 25-50, from Monday onwards, you continue to support them on a work visa. If you are, however, below 25-50, your partner will now be eligible for a visitor visa only, not a work visa. And if your kids are going to school, then you must be on a minimum income threshold of 43,322.76 or more. So that's roughly 44,000 for ease of clarity. So 43,350 if you want to say. So you must be on that income minimum to be able to support your kids that can continue going to school. There's another question that we have been asked quite substantially over the last few weeks is what happens to partners that have also got auto extensions till 25th of September? So if your partner has also got an auto extension till the 25th of September, and you are now renewing a visa under 25.50, the partner does still continue to hold the visa till the 25th of September. However, after that, if they plan to go on a visa dependent on you, then it will be a visitor visa. So you do need to make arrangements for that. Zini, anything else on the changes? Because I really do want to delve quite deep down into some of the labor market changes, some of the PPIs I've seen that people have got from applications they've done themselves. What I have picked up as trends on what immigration is doing now that they weren't doing previously. So I do want to talk about that as well. But before we do, yeah.
One of the key, the only probably the one, and I'm sure when the questions start coming in, we'll cycle back to these concepts. But immigration has specified that with the median wage changes on 27th July, every hour of work has to be paid at the median wage. So you have to be mindful of the overtime clauses in your employment agreements, because if the overtime clauses are written in a way that takes you over 40 hours and you're only 25.50 for 40 hours, you have a problem at hand.
And we do get this question asked quite a lot. For those of you that are on a salary, how does immigration divide that to an hourly rate? So that'll be the salary divided by 52 and divided by the maximum hours per week. And that gives you the hourly rate. Now, that has to be at a minimum of 25.50 per hour. Okay. Also, just to let you know that the stand down does remain. So stand down is not disappearing. However, there's a lot of people that have been on the 1 year, 1 year, and 1 year, and now they have a possibility of moving on to a 3-year visa. They can actually avoid that stand down. The stand down means that you can't go on to a 4th year with another low skill visa, which is now going to be a low paid visa because the terminology has changed. But you may be able to transition into another visa type, or you might want, some people have taken on student visas, or partners have become primary applicants. So you can look at other visa options, but you can't go on to another low skill visa the 4th time. So stand downs are not going anywhere else. Okay, so
so the 6 months, sorry, just one last thing. The 6 months plus 6 months plus 6 months. That is, if you're a lower paid, you can get 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. Now that is, it does go back. It has a deadline to it, so it does go back to 12 months in Jan 2022. So after 18 months, once this rule's implemented, it'll go back to the 12 months then. But then again, who knows what immigration does with policy?
Yeah. Okay. Now, people have been asking, there's a lot of questions that we've been getting around whether the SMC, whether the EOIs have opened or what's happened to the EOIs. Nothing's changed. It's still as it was. EOIs, you can still submit the EOIs, but they are not being selected. And I think one of the important things that people do need to understand is that if you are submitting an EOI right now, you can. But God forbid, if something changes when these EOIs do begin to open, then you are not safe from those changes. So you're not insulated from the changes if your EOI is not selected. Anything on that, Zinnia?
I would want to explore as to why are these people, if they're submitting an EOI, so say I am a client, I submit an EOI today under the current policy, why am I not insulated from the changes? So one of the things, yeah, I was asking, yeah, I mean, you can take the question if you want.
That's all right.
Yeah. So the reason why you're not insulated from the changes is because the policy is not really locked in until that EOI is selected and you get an ITA. It's the time when you get an invitation to apply. That's when your policy is locked in. So it's not at the time of submission of a EOI. It's not at the time of a selection of an EOI. It is at the time of an invitation to apply. So until unless you get that, it's not, the policy is not locked in for you.
Yeah. And if the changes do happen, then an EOI can actually be returned back into the pool. But we do know for a fact that the moment you submit your EOI, your fees gets deducted. So just be really careful that you don't go into your SMCs thinking that you're insulated from those changes, because you're not. The other thing that I really do want to touch on, because we do get this question asked quite a lot. In fact, we've had this question asked and we've been requested to cover this question, is that what happens if your visa has been auto-extended till the 25th of September or maybe longer after that, and you've got it till sort of February, March, April next year because it's been extended for 6 more months, but you've lost your job. Now, what people do need to understand very carefully is that if your visa has been extended, whether it is till the 25th or further on, and you are on a visa based on that job, so you're on essential skills, which locks you in with that job, you are in breach of your visa conditions by remaining on that visa and not actually being in that job. So even if your visa was not extended, you would still have to look at either another job, or you would have to look at changing that visa, or remedying your situation. So you can't just think that my visa has been auto-extended, because immigration doesn't have the power to actually check with each single person before they did the auto extensions. They've just put a blanket auto extension. If you've lost a job, you can be held in breach of your visa conditions if you don't fix that visa and just stay on the visa for another 6 months or so. So be very careful. In fact, I can tell you for a fact that I have been contacted by clients that have received compliance emails where compliance department has been notified that they haven't had the job since whatever time. Now, it's not that you lose a job today and you get a compliance email tomorrow. So there is there's an amount of reasonableness that needs to kind of fit in here. But I think that's a really important point for people to take away, that don't just sit complacently without a job when your visa requires you to have a job. Did I miss anything there, Zinnia? Anything that need to? Okay, cool.
I think right now, it's one of those things that breach of visa conditions right now, the environment is such that it's being looked at quite seriously. Immigration is because a lot of people are in the breach. Because of the COVID situation, a lot of people have breached. So immigration is looking at it quite carefully as to why it was breached, how did you do it, whose fault was it? Like, they are exploring this with a bit of a microscope at the moment.
Yeah. And there is, like I said, I can confirm for a fact, because we are doing this for a few clients of ours. There is not a direct, you're not liable for deportation directly, but there is a little bit of process that's involved. So it's not just you're okay without anything. So just take that point with you, please. Okay.
I think we should possibly I do just want to have a bit of a chat about ANSCO changes, because there's a question here from Sona Besnett that I believe ties into the ANSCO changes. With the new changes coming in, it is so important for people to remember that ANSCO is not going away. It is only going away from determining how long your visa is granted for. So in the past, as of up until end of tomorrow, visas will be made on a policy that when it decides the duration, there's two factors, your pay and ANSCO. Those together decide what the duration of your visa will be. Come Monday, only pay will decide the duration of the visa. But ANSCO is still used. ANSCO will be used to determine if your market pay is suitable or not. So how would immigration know, say, if a cabinet maker is being paid at a market rate if they don't have the ANSCO code? So if a particular laborer is being paid at the market rate that he should be, so they still need the ANSCO code to know what the market rate is. And then they also need to know whether that laborer is suitably qualified for the job or not, again, through that ANSCO code. So it is very important to still be very mindful that ANSCO code exercise is still being done, can have a substantial impact on your application, because ANSCO will decide how your adverts, whether your advert is inflated or if it's not, all of that will still remain.
Yeah, and I want to try and sort of narrow this down to some examples. So let's think that, and I know that on our Facebook page we've talked about some examples, and people have really understood those examples. So we just carry forward and say, if we have a skill level 1 occupation, so if we have, say, for example, a business development manager, and the employer calls them a BDM, and that's the role that they've got from the employer, and that's on the employment agreement. Now, if immigration, the employer supplementary form still requires an ANSCO title on it. So it requires an ANSCO occupation code. So if you pick up a BDM title and you pick up that occupation, and the employer fills that in as your nearest ANSCO occupation match, now a BDM, business development manager, is a skill level 1 occupation in ANSCO. Skill level 1 occupations require either 5 years of relevant work experience or a level 7 or higher qualification. Now, if you are someone who's done a level 5 and 6 business, has managed to earn $26, get $26 on your contract from an employer, and you've applied as a BDM position now, and your advert requires, says 2 years or 3 years. Now, this is where things become really tricky in your application, because even though ANSCO is not being used to decide the duration of your visa, ANSCO is still being used to decide suitability to the role. And that's what people now need to understand. If you are going to be matching yourself with an ANSCO occupation that you don't meet the requirements of, that's not the right match for you. And again, I think reversing this, there's, retail managers working in franchisee stores, that's quite often. You're working in Caltex, you're working in gas stations, in BP, and you are the site manager. You may be earning $27 an hour, sitting out of Auckland, where there's not many New Zealanders, so you kind of passed the labor market testing because the adverts haven't returned many people. But what you need to be careful of is what your advert says, because we have seen PPIs where your advert says that it requires 3 years because that's what ANSCO requires for a retail manager, but then immigration thinks that you're a retail supervisor. And then when immigration thinks that you're a retail supervisor, but then retail supervisor is a skill level 4, and that requires 1 year experience. But then your employer, with giving no explanation, is discounting people because they don't have the 3 years work experience. Now that has, for those of you that are listening, some of you will agree, that is the kind of PPI that is going out. And our prediction is that there will be a lot more PPIs and concern letters going around the remuneration and the requirements that an employer has laid in ads. If that makes sense. Is that 2 months in here? Is that too much of a chunk to explain? Do we need to break it down?
Yeah, I do think it's a bit of a mouthful for people who don't work with the policy every day. But what people need to be mindful of is where they drop. So like a BDM will normally, if they're not doing BDM tasks, is going to drop to a sales rep. A technical sales rep that's not using technical language, but you said it's a technical rep, will drop to a sales rep. What's the problem with sales reps? They're ANSCO 4. Cannot file residence on them. But here's the issue. ANSCO 4 means 1 year experience. You ask any more than that, you'll have to answer to immigration as to why you're asking any more than that. You ask for 1 year, everybody will apply. So it's that fine balance. Yeah.
So there is quite a bit of technicality that's involved in these applications. And I think we've spoken to quite a lot of people, and we are seeing these PPIs. And, I am seeing how these applications have been represented. And right now, especially after the 27th, there is no scope for gaps in your application. If there is a question, when we look at an application, we're like, okay, well, why did the employer ask for 5 years when you don't really need, you're a sales rep, why do you need 5 years? If there is something specific, it needs to be told up front. And I think that's how we pick up our applications, where we are looking at them with a microscope. So that's sort of one big part of it. I think we've got some questions in here. Let's take some questions, and I think we can then come to sort of the advertising part of it.
I just want to pick up Sona Basnet's question again, because she has given me a response. So the question was, hello both. If I'm earning above or below median wage in a different field, not of my study field, will I be eligible to apply for an essential skilled work visa? So she's given an example. I mean, I've done accounting and found a job in aged care. Am I eligible for essential skilled work visa? Okay. Now, Sona, this means that in your ANSCO code will be aged care worker. That is an ANSCO 4. Well, it's ANSCO 3 now? Is it changed?
Well, it's ANSCO 4, but it's in the exception list until the ANSCO changes to 1.3, but 3 years experience.
3 years experience, right? Because now it's treated as an ANSCO 3 occupation. You need 3 years of experience. This is where your issue will come. You can have a degree in accounting. That's not a problem. But do you have the 3 years of work experience in aged care? If you don't,
There's another issue with aged care, and we do a lot of aged care workers. Because aged care pays as per the equity. So you only get the 25.50 if you've done the level 4. If you haven't done the level 4, then you don't get the 25.50. If you've done the level 4, you get a tick because you've met the requirements of the ANSCO skill level. But if you haven't done it, then you're not okay. And if you are getting the 25.50, then you would have done the level 4 and then you're okay. So that's
and you can do the level 4 through your employers as well, because a lot of employers will take you through that. So that means, but she did say that if I'm getting below median wage, so say if she's getting below median wage, so not 25.
Well, then is it really worth the hassle? Because then you're only coming out with 6 months, the employer, and I think that's where things start to get really real. Is it really worth the hassle? Because the employer will have to go on to, the mainstream media, plus also engage with Work and Income for a position, do the hard yard, get a skill match report. If that comes out favorable, then you get a 6-month visa only.
It's almost like, as soon as you get your visa, start advertising again for the next visa. You pretty much just keep advertising the whole time. Yeah.
And so there may be other options that could be better rather than investing, your time and effort into something that doesn't really give you that much return. Let's take the question from Galib. It says, does it mean as long as we are making more than median wage, we are safe in skilled occupations? I think there is no yes or no answer, Galib, on that. Well, it's like we just said, it's not just about the salary. I mean, we are talking to people daily that have been with the same employer earning base salaries for like a whole year. And now suddenly the employer is looking at increasing it by $6. Now that sounds really unreasonable, isn't it? Now, if you don't give an explanation for that sudden jump, you're definitely going to be caught out. So there's a lot more math that goes behind just the little salary tick off. And I think that's why we wanted to do the session today, just to kind of get that message across, that even though ANSCO is not going to be used, it's not actually going away. Zinnia, do you want to take the next one from Tran? It says, if I earn 25.50, can I support my partner for a work visa?
Yes. Easy one.
Yeah. Yes, you should be able to support it. If the 5-year work visa expires in March 2022, do we need to renew or have to lodge an EOI? So Ash, just very quickly, if your visa expires in March 2022, that's still a long time away. We don't know what the policies are going to be at that stage. But as a simple rule of thumb, if your visa is expiring and you have a residence application under processing, you do need to renew the temporary visa, because you do need to remain on a valid visa for that residence application to process. EOIs are not being accepted right now. They're not being selected. So when that's going to happen is a mystery. When that does happen, you can absolutely have assurance from us. It'll be instantly pasted on our Facebook page.
But essentially, so if the 5-year work visa expires in March 22, do we need to renew or have? I don't think Ash needs to do anything at the moment. It just needs to sit tight unless the job is lost or something like that.
Yeah.
Next, EOI for SMC category. So as Arunima just said, we do not know when the EOI selections will be reinstated for the SMC or any other category that requires EOIs. But immigration has said that they are actively working on this part of it. It could potentially take them a while to come out with an answer. But for now, they remain suspended and it's unknown when they will reopen.
You probably can take the next one as well, Zinnia, from Peter.
Is truck drivers and skill list. Peter, I'm just going to ask you to write another comment here. that are you asking from an essential skill visa perspective or from a residence perspective? Because then I'll tailor my answer accordingly, because now it's not treated the same.
Yeah, and I think just on that point, one of the really important things that you guys need to take away or tell your friends is that just because you get the 3-year visa, so if you end up getting a 3-year visa, does not mean that you can use that experience as skilled experience towards your skilled migrant residence applications. Unlike what happens, what used to happen, what will happen before the 27 starts. If you are on a 3-year visa, well, technically immigration would consider that skilled. Only then they would give you something for 3 years and call it mid-skill. All of that is disappearing. So basically, simple representation is basically earlier your work visa and residence applications were pretty much in the same direction. They were aligned. And now your residence is in a different direction and your work visa is completely in a different direction. It may or may not be aligned. But at this stage, just because you get the 3 years does not mean at all that you can use that experience, because it has to be skilled. It's no longer about skills, it's about who gets paid higher. Okay, so there's a question from Mohammed. It says, according to new ANSCO list, in which skilled category chef comes? So Mohammed, I do know you, so I do know that what you're asking. There is no change coming up with chefs. However, as was announced by Immigration in November last year, the cooks seem to be dropping from the list. As of today, a cook is at skill level 3. And the understanding that we had was as soon as the new ANSCO comes out, cooks will drop to skill level 4. So what that means is that even though people might have had essential skills, mid-skill visas for 3 years as a cook, most likely by the time the EOIs open, the new ANSCO will be out. And those cooks will no longer be deemed as skilled, which means that they will not be able to apply for residence under the SMC category, if that makes sense. Then over to you.
Any update on residence applications from January 2019? So there's January 2019 applications would be getting allocated soon, because if you note, I put up a post on the Facebook a while ago in terms of how, not even a while ago, I think yesterday, how immigration is allocating applications. So they're currently allocating applications in the non-priority queue from December 2018 and in the priority queue from Feb 2020, if my memory serves me right. So right now they're allocating December 2018 applications, which means Jan 2019 wouldn't be far.
Yeah. And when we say that, we have seen some odd ones moving out that have been submitted later on. We've had a few approvals as well that were submitted later. So it is almost like there's multiple queues going on. It's very hard to tell. We've asked the question from immigration. We haven't really received the answers yet, because I don't think that they know, but I think there's multiple queues. But we're hoping that it shouldn't be too far. Deepak?
Yeah, you take Deepak's question.
So Deepak, you said HK are getting 2550. Do we need experience as well? If the question is for essential skills, if you are earning at a 2550 and if the employer can advertise for the role at national media, we should be able to look at a 3-year work visa. There's no experience needed. If you are looking at an SMC, then depending on what your background is, you probably will need work experience, skilled work experience to be able to get to 160. Happy to talk to you offline to look at your case and see what you're looking at, and then we can do an initial assessment. Unqualified teacher essential skills visa requirements, please. Param, it would be good if you can elaborate on that question. We do, there are a few few occupations that have been added to Appendix 7 that are not teachers. There's after school workers and childcare workers that have been added to the list. But I think we need a little bit more information. I can just tell you for a fact that if you are a registered teacher in New Zealand, and if you get a job you get a job, even if you don't have a New Zealand qualification, but you've got an overseas qualification, that is okay from an immigration perspective, as long as that qualification is recognized and you've got enough points. So you do not need to have a New Zealand qualification plus a registration, but a registration is required.
Peter. Okay, so Peter, truck drivers are only eligible for residence if they earn $38.24 or higher per hour. So 38.24 or more per hour is what they need to earn, because then they will be considered skilled. Because drivers in general, truck drivers in general, are ANSCO 4, and for an ANSCO 4 role to be considered skilled, they need to have that level of income.
Yeah. Okay. I thought it was 38.50, but we'll check it. 79,560.
It might be 38.50. I'll come back to that.
A gazillion times, and it's impossible to remember.
Yeah.
But we'll send you the exact dollar value. But it's 79,560 is what you need to earn for.
I'll just do it now. 79. So.
Yeah. Okay. Moving along. Jocelyn says, why is it?
It's $38.25.
That's right. Why is immigration taking so much time for verification process of SMC application? Jocelyn, I think your question is really interesting, because if you're saying why is immigration taking such a long time for general processing of the applications, that's because they're all over the show. They don't. They have advice that they are under-resourced for the numbers that they have on hand. The NZRP wasn't sent since December last year, so it is a big block of mess in that area, and there's just delays. But if your question is that your application's been allocated to an officer and that's taking very long because of complexities in verification, or something else has happened, then that's probably something that we need to advise individually. There could be certain complications in your application. So I think when you ask about delays in the verification process, that's quite different to what the others are talking about. That's just delays in general processing, not just the verification of it.
Surin asks, will alarm technicians remain on the skilled list? Okay, so alarm technicians are an ANSCO 3 role. So either your question is, will they remain an ANSCO 3 role? So that means they will remain a skilled role, or will they remain on one of the essential skills in demand or shortage lists? So answer to both is so far yes, because there is no reason to believe that they would not be in skill shortages. Skill shortage lists are revised, I think, around November, the time frame between November and January. Around that time, they are revised. So when the revision takes place, if they are taken off that, then that's a separate story. But for now, they are on the regional skill shortage list, and they will remain ANSCO 3. There is no reason to believe that they wouldn't be.
Yeah. There's no announcements to this effect that have come out. Conveer, you say, can you please advise why some non-priority SMC applications were allocated to case officers earlier than the others, even though they were lodged earlier? I only wish I could advise you the why. I don't think that even the government can advise you why. There's no answer to that. Like I said, I strongly believe that there's not just one, but there's multiple queues that are going on. But any of that information is speculation, and it doesn't really help any of us. So we don't know the why. Is retail manager from franchisee business still in the SME? I'm not too sure. What is the SME?
SME normally stands for small and medium enterprises, but I don't think that's what she means. I think she means SMC.
No, you're probably asking still in the SMC.
Maybe.
So, yeah, and I think if that's what you're asking, then I can possibly just add to that that retail managers have always been a skill level 2 occupation. That hasn't moved. It's what happens behind it. If you are working in an enterprise which is controlled by a head office, where you don't have control, or it's a franchisee business, or even if it's a brand that sits across multiple stores, and you don't have control on what products you can add, what you can remove, and all you can do is sort of maybe tweak the gross profit. You can't really make your own pricing. You can't decide your own suppliers. You can't really decide where to market the products. That is the issue. That is the core issue why franchisee or head office owned businesses are deemed as employing retail supervisors and not managers. So it's not just the occupation, but it's the sort of the nature of the whole employment that immigration considers.
Okay, Jyoti asks, talent work visa holders, if made redundant, can they switch to a non-accredited employer? If so, is there anything specific that needs to be taken care of while filing a variation of conditions? Answer to the first question, yes, they can switch to a non-accredited employer as long as, and this will answer your second question, as long as, one, they meet the objectives of the policy. That is, your employer is still compliant, as the role is sustainable, all those general requirements on the employers are met, you're still earning the same amount of salary that you did when you first filed your talent visa, and you lost a job due to a reason that is outside your control. So if you became redundant due to redundancy would be one of that. And so those are the type, and you're still qualified through skills and experience for the role that you are going to undertake. So 4 things: employer needs to meet its requirements, you need to still be earning 55K or 79,560, and you would also need to make sure that you're qualified for the role and you have the requirements to meet all of that, and the job is lost outside of your control.
Yeah. Now you can go on to the next one as well.
I've kind of lost my bearings. Oh, yeah, I found it. How much salary do we need to apply for residency in talent? 79,560 for 40 hours a week. If you are going over 40 hours, then you need to have $38.25 per hour. And if you are going under 40 hours, you still need to have 79,560.
Yeah. Just going back to Mohammed's answer. So Mohammed, if you cannot meet the point requirement of a SMC application, the question for those of you that haven't read it, it is, if a chef cannot apply for residence under the SMC, then what category can they go for? So chefs are on the long-term skill shortage list. And to meet the requirements of the long-term skill shortage list, you need to have a minimum level 4 qualification in culinary, cookery, plus a minimum of 5 years work experience in that area. And out of those 5 years, I think I'm just thinking from memory, out of the 5 years, you must have a minimum of 2 years at a CDP or higher level. So if you have in banqueting or commercial catering kind of establishment. So
requirements here.
Yeah, so if you meet those specific requirements, which a lot of chefs that come from overseas do meet, and so what we do is we put them onto a long-term work visa, LTSSL work visa pathway. You get the work visa for 30 months, 24 months. Once you've been in that role, you can actually apply for residence. So there is another pathway for chefs and other occupations in the LTSSL to apply for residence. That's the office making that noise because people
Are they closing up?
Yeah, it's the door. That door likes to be very noisy. Okay. I'm not sure if we picked up this question by Surain. I'm working here currently in the Northlands.
This was the alarm technician.
Okay. So probably out of Auckland points for SMC is, I don't know if that's what you advising on.
They're asking in regards to the regional skill shortage list. So if the alarm technician is in RSSL for all regions in New Zealand, because I'm looking at it right now, the issue is not where you work, but also whether you meet the specific requirements listed on the RSSL for the alarm technician. So I would want to chat with you privately because there are like the specific requirements that you need to meet for it. So whether you meet them or not is going to decide whether you meet RSSL requirements.
So for those of you that are keen to have a chat with us or just, avail because we do offer a no obligation free consult for the first few minutes, please feel free to inbox us on the AIMS Global page, Facebook page, or you can email us, or you can call our landline, or you can contact in any of the below numbers or email us. So in the mini, I've just responded to your question that you asked because I assumed that's what you were asking for. So we would move along. Benjamin, do you want to take that one?
Okay, Surin, sorry, just going back to Surin. So they are wanting to apply for residency. Yeah, I would, it's a bit to go through, so we'll probably best to get in contact with us privately. Benjamin asks, I've got my country's qualification converted to New Zealand and was awarded at level 7. I'm now working as an assistant farm manager and got 2 yesterday.
Years work experience. We'll just say years work experience.
Oh, okay. Got 2 years work experience under my belt. Am I eligible to apply for residency? My employer is willing to pay me above median wage to keep me. So assistant, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can take that one. I do deal with lots of dairy farm people. So assistant farm managers should be able to, so if you paid over the 2550, even before the rules changed that will be changing on the 27th, even today, we have been able to do mid-skill visa for assistant farm managers. Now, That's one specific occupation that has got a visa pack for. So immigration treats it slightly differently to allow them to get a 3-year work visa, even though they're not eligible for residence. From the 27th onwards, if your salary is over 25.50, and there's a lot more in how dairy farm managers work, and if you have accommodation and all the other bits and bobs, but if you have a base of 25.50, we should still be able to do a 3-year work visa. But like we said, it's not a skilled occupation. You will not be able to get a residence, but it can pave you a path for residence, because once you've had 5 years of work experience, you've already got 2 years. If you take 3 more years, at the end of that, you'll have 5 years work experience. And if you get a job as a dairy farm manager, or the top of the lot, and you get paid as per market rate, because again, the unions decide what these guys need to be paid. So there's market rates for those. Then we can possibly look at a residence application, because then you're in a skilled occupation. So have a chat with us if you want to know further.
And also, if you need to file residence under assistant farm manager, the pay rate will have to be a lot higher. It'll have to be $38.25 an hour. So it won't be $25.50 in that case.
Yeah.
Okay, Devinderjeet asks, can we apply for a visa without medical and PCC? You can apply for a visa without PCC, but if you need it, you will need to provide proof that you've applied for a PCC and you're waiting for it to come through. Medical, well, that's now everybody in New Zealand can get their medicals done. So there's no more exemption for that aspect of it, because everybody, like all appointments are available everywhere.
Unless your medicals and PCC are both valid.
Well, in that case, you don't have to apply for them.
We don't know. The borders are not open yet. We don't know when they're going to be open. They are open for, like we said ages ago, they are little doors that are forming. They're open for little doors, but a lot of uncertainty what's behind those doors as well. But there are little doors. But in general, the borders are closed. We don't know what your case is, but the threshold remains very, very high. If you are looking at border exemption, we've done a few. Actually, we are successfully doing border exemptions for quite a few of nurses that are coming from overseas for the CAP courses. So that's something that we have done quite successfully. We've had some nurses that have arrived as well. So that's definitely one of the doors that remains. But again, there's a lot of conditions in there.
So Devinderjeet wants to actually apply for a visa in the next 3 days, because he wants to get in before 27th of July. That is why he was asking if you can apply without a PCC or a medical. Hey, get an appointment in the next 3 days, get your medical done and apply for a PCC. It's just make the application and submit before midnight on Sunday, like before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday.
Yeah.
Can be done. It just depends.
Yeah. Amanda says, I'm from Australia and I have a business in New Zealand. Can I get into New Zealand now?
So you're from Australia, you have a business in New Zealand. Can I get in? So were you ordinarily living in New Zealand? I'm assuming if you had a business here, then you were normally living in New Zealand to be able to run that business. But then you can enter. But if you were running the business remotely and didn't normally live here, then you won't be able to enter. So it just depends on the situation. You're welcome to put a comment in there and then I can cycle back to it.
Yeah. And even when Zania says that you can enter, it's not just you rock up at the airport and just fly like you used to. There is an exemption process that needs to be applied. And once that exemption is granted, only then you can get through. But whether or not you're going to get that exemption granted is what Zania needs more information on. Zania, the next one's from Jyoti for you as well.
Thanks for that response. Can you please elaborate when you say required qualification for switching to a non-accredited employer? So it's not a required qualification because there's no specific qualification. It just means that whatever job you're applying for, you just have to be suitable for that job. So it would be sensible to keep to a similar job that you had as with the accredited employer. So for example, if you're working as a painter with an accredited employer, pretty bad example, but if you were working as a painter for an accredited employer, you can't work as a truck driver for a non-accredited because it's got no link to each other. So it just needs to be similar job because your skills will then transfer over.
Okay, so I'll take Joanna's question. So Joanna, you say that you're an occupational therapist planning to apply for your essential skills visa. Must we in family have to wait 2 years before we could apply for residence? Joanna, you can apply for residence when you're eligible. So as long as the EOIs get selected. So if you are eligible and you have enough points at the time that the applications are being selected, you can apply then. There is no requirement anywhere in the immigration instructions to wait for a certain period before you apply for residence. So you can apply as soon as you're eligible. I don't know what your background is. I don't know how many years of work experience you've had. More than happy to have a consultation with you. Occupational therapist is a skill level 1 occupation. So that does require you to either have 5 years of work experience or a level 7 or bachelor degree or higher in that relevant field for you to qualify. So maybe have a chat if you want to see when you'll be eligible.
So when Arunma was talking about residency there, she was referring to skilled migrant category. So there's no wait with skilled migrant category. As long as you make 160 and the EOIs are open, you can apply for it. But if you're on a talent accredited employer visa and you want to apply for residence under that category, then there is a 2-year wait. So it just depends what you're currently holding and which one you want to apply for residence under.
Yeah, I think just on that point, one of the really important things that I normally tell clients is that even if you're on a work to residence 30-month work visa, and you can use that because you can use any route that works better. So you can use that route to get a work visa, but if you're eligible for SMC quicker, then you don't actually have to go down the talent residence route. We can actually apply for SMC while you're on a work to residence. We can switch and match and play and work with the best available options. Any updates for post-study open work visas?
They're not being auto-extended.
Yes, so the only update that we have available is that they are not being auto-extended. There is no news about changes in that space. But again, it just depends on what happens post-elections. As soon as something does come out, we will let you know.
Amanda says, thank you. I was running it remotely from here. So if you were always running it remotely and you were not in New Zealand to manage the business, then you do not have a critical purpose for being in New Zealand, because if it's functioning remotely and you were able to manage it remotely in the past, and if you always have, then that will stay that way. Then you do not qualify to meet even the board exemption criteria.
One of the things that I do want people to so we've gone through pretty much all the questions. We'll see what comes through. We're coming to the end of our session anyways. But I really want to talk about what immigration is looking for when they are testing whether the employer has made genuine attempts or not. We've seen, just in the last week and a bit, the number of people that have come to us through either other advisors or the applications they've done themselves that have now been PPI'd or even declined is exorbitant. Because what's happening now is that previously just telling immigration that you had 30 people that applied through TradeMe, and out of that 9 people were New Zealanders, and then 5 people were either not available because you couldn't get through to them, or they got jobs, and then the 4 had this background, was enough. And that was okay. You could get a visa approved with that information. Now that's not enough. There is a lot more delving into the information that's happening now. And so when we are making submissions, there is a lot more information as to why those 4 people that were left were not, suitable. What in the background, did you interview them? Was there any attempt made? Because the test is not just suitable New Zealanders. The test is also whether those people are readily trainable. So there's a lot more that's happening with the labor market checking, and just checking whether an employer is making genuine attempts. So just, cursory information is no longer enough. I think that's quite an important thing. Things that used to work pre-COVID, and an employer might have done hundreds of visas with the same information, is no longer working because immigration is looking for a lot more. So I think please just make sure people that are applying for the visas that that. Zinnia, anything else in that space, in the LMC space? I think that's the big sort of monster because we've done some work with the new portal with MSD as well. Is there anything we want to tell people?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think what the other thing that that people have to be mindful of, it kind of sits a little bit outside the immigration space, is the privacy of the people that are applying for roles. The employer is giving all of that information to immigration, but they also in this process have to be mindful of the privacy of those that are applying. Like don't lose that.
Yeah. just the other thing, I think that sort of takes me into a really interesting point as well, that we have also seen, I mean, you do need to appreciate that immigration's been through quite a lot of change, and there's a lot of new officers that have come into processing teams. And when you have new staff, it takes a while before you get trained. We've seen immigration asking for some information that is asking for date of births for all the other employees and asking for things that are a clear breach of privacy. So, just by immigration asking for all that information doesn't mean that we just give that information. And that's where a really good advisor comes into play, because we can strike that balance and say, okay, well, immigration, you don't actually need that information because that's outside the scope. Or yes, we'll give it because, it's needed to get the application. But just be aware that, by sharing other people's details, other employees in the business, that there is a breach of their privacy that's happening there, whether immigration's asking for it or whether you're readily giving it. So there's all these other things that need to be kept in mind.
I think like just right now, there's an example that I can give because I was working on it this morning, where immigration, the applicant he's sharing money with a friend and things like that, and so there's deposits coming from the friend. So immigration asked for the date of birth for the friend. So they asked, give us the date of birth of the friend, and we're like, no, we're not. And the immigration officer backed down. He's like, okay then.
Yeah. So I think and I think that's where we really need to know our stuff at this stage, and I think that's where a good advisor comes in. Let's just pick up a few more questions before we wrap this up. Jasleen, just coming back to your question. So you said you've given your documents to immigration post-lockdown and payslips and ID summary and bank statements, and it's been 7 weeks and no response. I would suggest just follow up. I do know for a fact that officers are running behind things, but they do have standard operating procedures that they need to follow and respond within certain time. If the officers acknowledged your documents and they're still reviewing them, then that's possibly okay. But the only thing you can do is follow up. Zinnia, do you want to take the next one?
10 years work experience as a bar manager. So Nadi's British, 10 years experience as a bar manager. What are my options for, I'm assuming, residency? I don't
know if you are in New Zealand or if you're outside. Can't tell.
Yeah, so we need to know a lot more with residents. We need to know age in New Zealand, outside New Zealand. Do you have a job offer in New Zealand? And you've mentioned you've got 10 years work experience, but there's a lot more qualifications, partners qualifications. There's a lot that we need to explore. You're welcome to contact us privately and we can ask those questions.
Yeah. There's one more that we'll just take from Rishalat. Hi, I would like to apply for essential skills visa. I'm a qualified teacher on early childhood care. I would like to work in New Zealand. Rishalat, if you are, and I think Nadi has just replied as well, that he's also outside, or she, sorry, is also outside of New Zealand. So any of you that are outside of New Zealand and you are looking for jobs in New Zealand, the borders are closed, and we don't know when they will begin to open. But I think if there's any place to be in this world right now, it is New Zealand. We're in a good place and we're really pleased. And so the borders do need to be quite tight. So at this stage, there is no answer. We don't know what the policies for people that are outside looking at coming to New Zealand for jobs will look like after the elections, but we will definitely keep you posted. So follow our page if you want to know more.
Okay. So we're 53 minutes into this.
Yes, I think we've done pretty much everything. We've covered pretty much everything. If you have any questions, we do these sessions every now and then. We probably do them about 2 or 3 weeks. If you have anything specific between this time, please feel free to contact us. And we can, our teams are manning our messages and we're trying to come back to clients as soon as we possibly can. Our first consultation is free and we do offer you a quotation post that, and you're welcome to go ahead or just go with the advice. All right, guys.
I'm just going to pick up these 2 questions because I can answer them very quickly. Am I open going to essential skill work visa? Can I work on interim visa? No. It's a visitor visa condition. VOC timeframe, I checked this yesterday. I can tell you precisely it's 47 days as listed on the website. So if you've applied more than 1 month ago, it's roughly 47 days. There is one good piece of news that I want to end this with because I just made the post today and it uplifted my spirits a little bit. we were looking at some statistics, numbers, and this and that. So since the lockdown, obviously, like if for July, this is for the month of July, essential skilled work visa approval rate. So roughly, don't quote me on this, but like 2,300 applications have been processed, all onshore, obviously, because nothing offshore is being processed, or 2,300 essential skills onshore have been processed. 91% approval rate from immigration on that. So, and that's really good, because I remember when we had one of these Facebooks about 3-4 months ago, when the labor market changed, we were wondering if essential skills what would happen to that category. So that was a positive piece of news.
That's good. It's good. It's always nice to end on a positive piece of news. So guys, that brings us quite nicely to the wrap up of our session today. Thank you for joining us. For those of you that we've answered your question, hopefully you find it valuable. If you don't, we always like feedback. If you did, then feedback would be great as well. And for those of you that we haven't been able to get to your questions because they've only just come in now, please inbox us and we will pick it up. Have a good evening, all of you, and we will see you soon.